Did we have anybody sign up to speak?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Nobody did. Excellent. Okay,
Mr. Chairman. No.
Oh, here you go. Sorry.
all right, there you go. I'll go ahead and give it to you so I don't lose it. Okay, we only have one item really on the new business tonight. We had decided earlier to dedicate this entire meeting to the discussion of NED. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get that started. A 2103, and Newton, do you want to lead us off with the discussion, or how you want to handle this?
That's fine, John. If you've got it, I'm gonna be using the red line.
I'll have it on the screen for everybody.
All right, when last we met substantively on this, we had attempted to draft an ordinance that took AKB and.
Your
situ-
microphone doesn't seem to be on.
Maybe my brain's not on, the
It's
microphone's working. It sounds like it's on.
It is, ma'am. So,
All right, when last we discussed this substantively, you were presented with an ordinance that essentially took the restrictions of AKB, the requirements of AKB along Highway 16, which was largely undeveloped, and applied them to the North Expressway. And it became clear after your first meeting to review it, that was not going to work. So, though Deborah and I had a pile of things that intervened, we finally got this together. And I want to apologize to you for not being here on, I believe it was December the 1st when this was considered, because I was called away unexpectedly on a case in Baldwin County and could not be here. However, y'all also had Cherokee Rose that night, and y'all had so much fun with Cherokee Rose, you probably would have not been in the mood to deal with this ordinance and overlay at that time. So, if you've got the red line up, then you can see that the use of AKB has been removed. The references or the similarities to AKB have been removed. So, what you have in section 21, just walk through it, in section 2201D is the statement of the purpose of the ordinance. And let's look at 2202D subpart A. The most controversial thing I think you're going to deal with tonight is how for us to draw a map that governs what the North Expressway Improvement District applies to. And you should have in your packets a map that Deborah did, which was based upon the premise that we would adopt AKB 750 feet. 750 feet is not going to work because it would extend the overlay into residential areas behind the commercial frontage on the North Expressway and extend it in certain places beyond the boundaries of Old 41. That was in the original map. Now, I believe that this map, and Brad, I didn't have time to go over this with Deborah, she revised it to pull it down to where these are essentially mostly frontage lots, though there are some secondary lots behind the front that go back a little ways on both sides of 1941. I suspect this is going to be your most controversial component of this ordinance to deal with. But the bottom line is, rather than in the old ordinance, we had a boundary of 750 feet, excuse me, from the right-of-way on 1941, and you can see that that has now been changed to just adopt a map. The map will be parcel specific, and the map will identify the specific boundaries. Now, I added a couple of definitions, and you will see how they play out. Mixed-use development, which is a standard definition of mixed-use development, and planned development, which is, again, a standard definition for planned development. Now, within the North Expressway Improvement District, there are 3 different types of permitted uses: a planned single-family residential development, a planned commercial development, and a planned mixed-use development. When you look, as we go through, you're gonna see that these do not have significant size limitations in terms of the size that's required. We'll go through them separately. The principal uses that are allowed tie into principal uses and special exception uses that are in existing zoning districts. So for example, a planned single-family residential district includes the uses that are in R1, R2, and I believe R2, and then R6, which is the condo district. You will note that we did not include R3, which would mean that standard rental apartments on the North Expressway would not be permitted. You could have a 0 lot line condominium development, but it would require ownership and owner occupancy. Or it'd be a condominium. I'm not saying the condominium couldn't be rented, but it'd be a condominium governed by covenants and so forth. The second is a planned commercial development, which includes C1, C1A, and that's it. Now, the bulk of the auto development that has been permitted along the North Expressway has been under C1B, which is heavy commercial as opposed to highway commercial. So this is now restricted to highway commercial and also neighborhood commercial. So a shopping center could be there. Something that doesn't have outside storage could be there that's commercial. But the C1B heavy uses, heavy commercial uses, are not permitted any longer along that stretch of road. And then we've added planned mixed-use development. This will have, as you will see, a size requirement, but it would allow any principal uses that are in A1 and A2 of this section, meaning single-family residential or commercial commercial development, as well as office and institutional, excluding certain other uses that are in that class, okay? So you could have you could have a planned mixed-use development that would include residences, condominiums, commercial, and offices and institutional uses. All right. The same follows through. If it's a special exception use allowed in those districts, it's allowed in the overlay zone.
I have a question, please.
Yes, sir.
Back on commercial. By restricting it to C1 and C1A, that allows no auto sales whatsoever?
That's correct.
Okay, even
Nothing with outside storage. Now, the ones that are there,
yeah,
the ones
yeah.
that are there, fine.
And so, so for example, someone wanted to put a new car sales up, not next to Chronic, but in that open area above, that would be prohibited, or can they apply for a conditional?
Walter, that would be prohibited unless y'all want to include that as a.
Well, I don't necessarily. I'm just trying to get my head straight on this.
It would be prohibited.
Okay.
Anything with outside storage would be prohibited. A standard shopping center is permitted.
Okay, now, and again, The way you do these things, under C1A, does that include auto repair, or is this gonna limit auto repair?
C1A is neighborhood commercial, which
Yeah.
is our lightest commercial zone.
Okay,
And that does not include auto repair.
okay, that's what I need to know, thank you.
Any more questions today? And please understand, y'all can direct amendments to this and changes to this tonight. That's fine, yeah.
So again, like the C1B, for example, the R3 up at the far northeast corner of the map, that R3 would still be permitted?
That's correct, because Bruce, it pre-exists.
Right.
Chronic, all of the dealerships that are there, Napide, all of those are left untouched. Okay? All right. And look at page 5, section D. You can see that we protect non-conforming lots and uses. All right. Now,
Can you tell me can you remind me what section 403 is? Be governed by section 403?
oh, that's the non-conforming use section in the UDO.
And so, in essence, this says non-conforming uses are grandfathered forever?
Shall be, except that they're governed by section 403, and 403 provides for a termination period, Walter. If-
Okay, walk me
if-
through that.
Okay, if a non-conforming use ceases for a year,
Yeah,
then that non-conforming use is no
Okay.
longer protected.
but,
In other
okay.
words, somebody cannot go in, let's say you've got, well, let me put it in terms of, let's say, sweet returns. That is the recycling facility, right below School Road. Okay. That recycling facility is not permitted under this ordinance within the overlay.
Right,
But it can continue to exist as a non-conforming use. If Sweet Returns were to go out of business and the property not be used for a recycling center for at least a year under section 403, then the right to have the recycling facility there goes away. And that is the standard non-conforming use provision in section 403.
can I ask one, I'm sorry, I need to ask one
That's
further
fine.
question. Let's say that recycling, what's it carry, a C3 or C, what's their zoning category?
Recycling, well, right now, they're already a non-conforming use under,
Well, let's take
Probably.
those C2s at the top of the map.
okay. I'm not talking about the forklift graveyard now, I'm talking about Sweet Returns down below.
Right, but I guess what I'm trying to get at,
I think there's C1.
I
okay,
believe it is C1 on the map. yeah.
Let's go to Q
Can you
Public.
pull it up on Q Public, Ray?
Yes, sir. What's the address?
Well, hold on, just go up the sunny side.
All right.
All right, come down. Whoa, all right, we've gone a little too far. All right,
It's right in that area.
That's Sunnyside.
all right, you should be able to see,
You need me to zoom in?
yes, sir, if you don't mind. All right, you can see all, well, look, Davidson Pipeline right there is not gonna be a permitted use. That's the property there at the lake. It used to be was it Twilly's Pond?
It was Twilly,
All right.
yeah, Twilly's
All
Pond.
right, we'll use that. Now, drop right below there, Brad, and see if that isn't, yep, that's Sweet Returns.
Okay.
All right,
There you go.
all right,
So,
that's the
C1.
recycling property, all right. Can you do the zoning overlay? Okay, so
C1.
it's on C1.
Mhm.
All right, it's already a non-conforming use in C1.
yeah, and here's my here's what I'm trying to get at. let's say I buy that company for its zoning. I want to put an auto dealership there. Can I buy Sweet Return, tear it down, and put an auto dealership there?
No,
Okay, what stops me?
the fact that you're changing the use.
Okay, okay,
You're changing the use from a reason, now, if you wanted to buy it and continue to use it as a recycling center, fine.
right.
If you want to buy it,
And
you
how,
can't, under this ordinance, keep in mind, the property is zoned C1. It's zoned standard highway commercial, okay?
okay,
So you can put, and consistent with this overlay, you can put a C1 use on there as a matter of right. All right, if you don't want to have the recycling center. If you want to have the recycling center continue, then you buy it as the recycling center. You can continue to operate a recycling center. However, if the recycling center goes out of business, or the property is not used as a recycling center, for as long as a year, the right to have the recycling center goes away. That doesn't prevent you from doing commercial development, redevelopment on that property.
okay, the right to have a recycling center goes away, but the zoning stays.
Zoning stays, because it's already a non-conforming use.
So I can put another non-conforming use on that land.
No. You can put a
What am I
conforming-
missing?
You can put a conforming use on that land. Your right to a non-conforming use is tied to the use as of the day the ordinance is passed.
Right,
All right, so let's go back to the map, Brad. All right.
You public map or overlay
Where-
map?
That one right there. All right, so, all right, Walter, you can see where the outline is
Yeah.
of Sweet Returns, the recycling center. Okay. That property is zone C1.
right.
We do not allow a recycling center in C1.
Oh,
It's prob-
okay, but that's not a good example for what I'm, okay.
All right, now, so, it's already non-conforming, and the same rule would apply whether it's under this ordinance or whether it's under the overlay. You can come in and buy this property, and you can continue to operate a recycling center there because the use is a protected,
Okay,
pre-existing non-conforming use. Now, when that use goes away, if it goes away, and it goes away for at least a year, you can no longer have a recycling center. Whatever use is gonna be put on that property has to comply with the zoning ordinance in existence at the time, so you would have a C1 use that's permitted.
okay, I'm sorry to be so dense. I guess what I'm trying to, let's turn it around. Let's take that R3 at the very top of the map.
Okay, that's Southampton trailer park.
And that, okay. Now, okay, can I buy Southampton Trailer Park and put in apartments?
Can you buy Southampton,
Uh-huh.
move the trailer park out,
Yeah,
and put in apartments under R3?
right.
Okay. That's when the overlay kicks in, and the overlay doesn't allow apartments.
Okay.
You could
okay,
put in-
okay. The
You
answer-
could
that-
put in
That
condominiums.
answers my question. That's what I need to know.
Okay.
But you could have condominium.
You could
Yeah,
have condominiums, you could
Yeah, I
have,
understand that. I was just trying to make sure that you couldn't buy a zoning.
But that's
You
what
could buy a non-conforming zoning.
and that's what I was asking because, but is already R3. I mean, it's there, it's kinda like C1B is not allowed either, but we're saying that if it's C1B, it's still C1B zoning.
but the overlay, even though the property is zoned R3, Bruce, the overlay renders that use now non-conforming. Okay. And you could put in a planned residential development, you could take the trailers out, put in a commercial development, you could do a mixed-use development, or you could do a residential development that is multifamily but condominium under our C6 class.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the only place we have C6, to my knowledge, Brad, you may know better than I, is I think it's Wolf Laurel that is down 19, just at the county line, below Ingalls.
Yeah.
I think that's the only one is actually
Yeah.
an R6.
I was trying to get at is how this works
Okay.
in the real world. On paper, it's all making sense to me, but in the real world, I wanna go. But what if somebody does this? So now I understand.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the non-conforming businesses, I know you set parameters that if they go out for a year, that they cannot start up the non-conforming business again.
Correct. And
So-
that's not in this, it's in the regular code that y'all
I
have.
understand, but I guess what my question would be, so that recycling center is there forever and ever and ever as long as it's a recycling center?
Pretty much.
All right,
He can't expand it. He can't take the lot
can we
next to
put
it.
an end date on the use of that land with the contingency that they would have to come in and make some adjustments toward?
Really
For instance,
so.
let's say you put a 10 years from now, that this ordinance goes in, the recycling center has in some way got to improve.
We can impose new aesthetics regulations and requirements on that use, but we cannot make that use go away.
What if it is sold? Can we put it on the new owner to do that?
The presence of the recycling center and the right of the recycling center to be there will continue to the new owner.
Okay, all right.
There's not a lot we can do about it.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example where they attempted to do it. You know, we have billboard restrictions going down interstate highways in some places. And we've enacted things that try to eliminate the distraction of these huge billboards, okay? So, therefore, you get these little signs as you're heading to an exit that tells you what's at that exit.
Right.
All right. The initial ordinance, the initial rules and regulations governing those billboards said, if you have depreciated down that billboard to a zero value, then it's got to be torn down. It's done. And the Georgia Supreme Court said, no, that's not the case. It still has value, and you get to have it. The person continues to be able to have the billboard there irrespective of its value or the length of time of its use. And if you want to eliminate that billboard, treat it as a taking and buy it.
That's the
Yeah.
Tooten Amendment to the 1965 Highway Beautification Act.
So, and we are one of the few states that has that stricter rule that says even after it's depreciated, there's economic value. So our ability to come back and deal with a non-conforming use is limited.
Repeat.
Our ability to come back and deal with a non-conforming use in its entirety is very limited.
Okay.
It's just the way it is. And we've just had to deal with that with the forklift graveyard. Okay. All right. Now, when we get to the procedures, the next step is procedures. This ordinance takes the position that every development is a planned development that's within the overlay. It doesn't matter if it's 25 acres, it doesn't matter if it is an acre. It is treated as if it is a planned development. Now, by treating it that way, what we do then is identify a procedure that gives us the ability to pay special attention to them and to development in that corridor. So, for example, there will be a pre-application conference all right? And that will involve a meeting with an applicant that includes the zoning administrator and includes Mr. Yeomans, unless y'all kick him out as chairman.
Can we do that?
All right, now, this is consistent with AKB. Then you have to have a master development plan. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's 100 acres or whether it is an acre. You have to have the plan, and this requires approval of that plan and that plan to be conditioned, or any issuance or any approval conditioned on that plan. Now, what you have on page 6, going into 7, are the procedures for the review of the master development plan. And these, again, are essentially the same as we have in AKB. Those are not changed. I don't want to have us, in two circumstances that are still that similar, have different procedures on one 4-lane versus another, even recognizing that the characteristics are different. The procedures will be the same. Now, look at 2207D on page 8. Proposed development on any property located within in the NEID overlay must comply with the following. All right? Now, this presumes zoning is in place. Prior to filing a permit for development, the applicant shall confer with the zoning administrator, the chairman of the Board of Appeals and Planning Commission. The applicant must submit a master development plan that meets the requirements. The permit will be issued after the master development plan has been reviewed by the Planning Commission and approved by the Board of Commissioners, as if, or in the same manner as would be required if the proposed development required rezoning. And any permit for development will be conditioned upon the approved master development plan. So that means if that plan changes, they've got to come back and have that reviewed again. Now, in 2208D, we go through general development standards in NEID. You will see there are not a lot of changes in this, because other than for the misapplication of AKB to the North Expressway, the standards that are here, which we have taken largely from Coweta County,
Yeah.
from Henry County, to a lesser extent, Clayton. These standards of development are pretty consistent among those plans, among those ordinances. So we are not going out on a limb to impose some dramatically different site plan requirement or some dramatically more stringent regulation than what those counties imposed. We drew a little heavier from Coweta than Henry. The Henry County overlay covers, and they've got it listed with certain roads, but virtually every state highway and every major thoroughfare in Henry County is the subject of an overlay. All right, and I will give you an example of the breadth of that, because I've got a case involving one of them now. The restrictions in the overlay, they identify uses that can't be there, that are absolutely precluded along any highway. All right,
Yes.
one of them is a sex toy shop, and the other is auto repair.
Auto repair shop or auto parts?
Repair shop. Auto
A
repair
garage.
shop. Pardon me?
A garage, right?
A garage. So if you live on Jodico Road, for example, and you would like to get your car in for service, you can't do it on Jodico Road. Now, we are not quite that restrictive, but again, we picked and chose. I'll give you another example out of the Coweta County ordinance. If you can see a solar panel from Highway 34 on the roof of a building on Highway 34, it has to come off.
Are we talking about Bullsboro?
On Bullsboro and, Bullsboro's
It's
is 34 coming out of
Yeah.
Newman, that's correct.
Okay.
All right? Some of them can be, I think, a bit ridiculous. I asked the county manager in Coweta County if I was not aware that there had been a sudden surge in nausea among the residents of Coweta County who were exposed to the sight of solar panels on Highway 34. Now, then after so these restrictions, these regulations that govern all of the types of development, again, are not out of line with the counties that are around us. And did not require significant change from the first draft that you had. Now, once you go over the, excuse me, once you go over the general requirements, if you get to 2209D, you now have specific development requirements for a planned residential development.
New,
Yes, sir?
before we go too far, could I just ask a couple of questions?
Yes, sir.
Back on 2208. So, again, I know we're saying it's not that different than some of our surrounding counties, but, like the AKB overlay and all that, does it require the landscape architect, licensed landscape architect for everything in there?
Well, you can see that the landscaping provisions in B, Bruce, basically track Arthur Bolton. Right?
Well, that's what, I guess I'm getting at. I understand it being a planned development and stuff, but again, if you have a small acre lot, that's just another, generally your civil engineer can do the basic requirements for, the basic things around a small parking lot and in front of that, but then to have to get another layer in there for, a licensed architect, a landscape architect, just
Right.
adds more money for them to have to do for the development versus for
does.
something that's a 50-acre tract or something,
It
Just
does.
curious about
Look at, on page 9, 2208D, B, 2B. The landscape plan must be prepared and stamped by a registered landscape architect licensed to practice in the state.
And the other.
And we may get criticism over that on the smaller tract.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, it does, all this adds cost, so, again, I don't wanna prohibit people, I just want them to do it as well as possible. The other item there under 2208DC, then the number one. or
Capital
the
C
I,
or little c, Bruce?
The little c,
Street planning area?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It refers to section 2207DB1, which I can't find the 2207DB1.
That probably is supposed to be 2208.
Okay, and so
Hang
that
on,
would
let
go
me
back
check.
to the other landscape buffer that's referred to there,
Because
where's
it's a reference to the landscape buffer.
okay, so,
2207 is procedures for development, and we don't have a BD1.
okay, so that would be, that's the 8, so we are saying then basically that along 1941, we're gonna require a 50-foot buffer, but then on any other roads, they would need to have a 20-foot buffer.
Correct.
That's correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Just wanna make sure I understood.
And again, Bruce, those are not, those distances are not our, they are our original thought, but it's based upon other ordinances that we've used to develop
Okay.
this.
So
Same
that-
thing with some of the height of these trees and stuff? Like the 12-foot tree in some places, an 8-foot tree in there? Okay. That's just take it from there. Okay.
Yep.
Excuse me,
And
gentlemen.
again, if y'all feel that you feel like that those are too restrictive, then y'all tell me to change it.
Right.
But again, I didn't exercise original thought to say, we've got to go out and get a 12-foot tree. That's,
Right.
Well, Bruce, what do you think a workaround would be for a smaller parcel? You think it would still have to pass muster with the planning, whoever the planning person is, if they can accept that, or?
Well, I guess that's what.
I'm a little worried that, I mean, I see what you're saying, but also I see sometimes if you give somebody a break, they take advantage of it.
Right. Well, I just was going back to the fact, they're gonna already have to have a meeting, the pre-meeting, to go over things and stuff and kind of work through those kind of aspects of what their real plan is and so forth. And so there's some other steps in there that we're working through to get to this point anyway. So I was just wondering if something like that could be worked out. But again, I don't want to make things, things need to be as simple as possible to kind of work through. But again, then we're taking, in some areas, you only need a 3-inch diameter or caliper 8-foot tree versus a 3-inch caliper 12-foot tree in another location. I mean, good gracious, who's gonna get there and be doing all these measurements is what I was wondering about, so, with the various slight differences. But
well, I
anyway.
think what both the Henry and, excuse me, what both the Henry and the Coweta County ordinances do is set different criteria for your canopy tree versus the understory tree. And they have different requirements for both of those. Now, again, y'all can change those. But again, we did not exercise any independent thought. This is what our neighbors have done.
And this is fairly simple, but I know there's other locations where, it also considers what trees are already on the site, the size of trees already on the site, and, a number of other elements come into play at times as well.
We actually enhanced the landscaping on the street side from what's in AKB because the landscaping would help improve the aesthetics going up 1941.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I question Mr. Galloway? On page 9,
Yes, sir.
4, perimeter planning areas,
I'm sorry, Frank, where are you? On 9?
on
What section?
9, yeah, D, and it would be D2.
Okay.
Actually, I'm sorry, let's drop down to E, interior planting. Island shall be landscaped with shrubs and ground cover 1 foot high at planting. What kind of ground cover would be a foot high at the planting?
So determine each requires at least 10 feet wide, 18 feet long, include 1 canopy tree, which will be 3 inches caliber.
Oh, so last sentence in that paragraph.
The remaining area of terminal island shall be landscaped with shrubs and ground cover 1 foot high at planting. So that just means your shrubs just got to be a standard shrub.
Yeah, this would be
Okay.
like your ground.
I thought ground cover was like vegetation.
Mr. Chair, I believe that at the time that you put it in the ground, it needs to be at least 12 inches
That's
from
correct.
the time that you put it there, so it will still continue to grow, but that's the minimum that's required to get it to where it needs to be in a timely fashion.
So you're not talking about vegetation, I mean
No.
grass, you're talking about
We're not
shrubs.
talking about
Yes, sir.
grass, we're talking about
Okay.
shrubs.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, any questions before we go? Okay. Beginning at 2209D, this begins the specific development requirements for the particular planned development. The first is a single-family residential development. We do require there a minimum 20-acre size. I don't know that that is, I can tell you we didn't put, that's not in the other ordinances. That is an, that's just an ad hoc number based upon, I will tell you that I looked at the size of the tracts that are undeveloped along there, where you might have residential development. I personally believe that residential development is probably unlikely, except for an R6 condo type development. But anyway, again, that could be subject to change. Then you have the other standard requirements that we have within a planned residential development if one were to be built in AKB. Now, let's look at 22. So in other words, other than that size, that specific size, well, I take that back. I'm sorry, guys, I made an error. That is taken, I believe, from AKB. I'm sorry. Now, if you'll look at, but and so the rest of those regulations are already in place along Georgia 16. Look at page 14, section 2210D. These are the standards for a planned commercial development. Now, you will notice that we do not have a minimum size for a planned commercial development. The reason for that is because if you look at the map, there are a number of lots that are pretty small. There are a number of existing parcels that are pretty small. So, but keep in mind, even though that tract is small, it is still considered a planned development for which a master site plan will be required, either as a condition of zoning or as a condition of getting a building permit. So, the minimum planned commercial development size is as set by the Spalding County Health Department, which is the same size requirement that I believe is in C1. Okay. Then, again, you have the development standards for a commercial development. Now, because we added in mixed use, I just caught another error. If you will look at page 17, that should be section 2211D,
Yep.
planned mixed-use development standards. So that means I'm gonna have to renumber going from there. Now, mixed-use development is not something that was in the earlier draft. We do have a minimum planned development size of 5 acres. I think that is a reasonable amount of property to have a decent mixed-use development. And there are some tracts along 1941 which will qualify for that if somebody wanted to come in and redevelop. And you can see the requirements, the development requirements for that mixed-use development. And I can tell you that it is very similar to those that are in the planned commercial development ordinance. There's nothing particularly new there. Well, it looks like I corrected the numbering problem on 2212, okay? You know, it's interesting, you look at these ordinances, you look at it and you look at it, or I'll look at a brief over and over and over, and then you get it filed, or you
Yeah.
get it ready to prepare, and guess what? There's a new typo or error. All right. The AKB ordinance includes criteria for development incentives, and I carried those forward, with the exception of the fact that we allow a mixed-use development as a permitted use, whereas mixed-use development was an incentive under AKB. And then we deal with the hardship tract.
Back up just a second.
Yes, sir.
I think I'm correct on this. Outdoor storage and display is handled under the zoning categories.
That's
not-
correct.
Doesn't need to be specified here.
Correct.
Okay, just checking.
And outdoor storage would not be permitted in C1 or C1A going
Yeah,
forward.
that's what I thought.
Unenclosed outside storage. Okay, the development incentives are essentially the same, again, with one being deleted. And then we have a provision for dealing with hardship tracts with encouragement for people, for example, if there's a larger tract being developed, for that developer to come in and acquire a smaller tract next door, so that it can be developed in a more comprehensive, manner. So, those are the changes from when we last substantively reviewed this. And I come back to the premise that the main problem that y'all have is giving Brad direction on how to draw the lines to which, as to which tracks this ordinance will apply.
Okay, I'm not sure that I understand any potential problem of making it a little more narrow. Is there a problem with that?
You mean making
The corridor more narrow?
no, there's not, no, Walter, there's
I
not.
mean, I understand that we've gotta, if it's gotta be the whole parcel,
Correct.
but there's several places here where we've got like parcels 2 or 3 deep, and I don't know that we need to go any deeper.
Good point.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's the point, because, for example, Brad, go up to the top of the, all right, for example, you're up,
You could follow that parcel line, kind of, let's see if we can
Yeah.
get that in there.
Yeah, I
But
see it.
like come down here and follow that parcel line down, almost just inside that little green deal. But
Yeah.
you'd have to go back to the ordinance and change it from being a 700-foot depth or 800-foot depth from the, center line of the street. But you could follow that parcel line down where it makes
That's
sense.
correct.
That's another reason why we got the bigger one. If we needed to red pin it, I can go get a red Sharpie real quick if y'all wanted to do that.
if you will, and Brad, if your cursor on down, for example, all right, now that's,
Right-
it's
right in here.
not quite that far. All right, so for example, your parcels that are right at the county line coming down to School Road go back further in depth. And you've got those 2 little baby C1 parcels that are sitting there right at the corner of School Road. All right, I think that's school, isn't it?
Let's check it and see.
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
oops. 'Cause I still hadn't memorized those roads yet. So,
what's wrong with you? You've been here 6 months. sir.
Malier,
oh,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
it's Malier, I'm sorry, it's Malier.
thank you
School's
for
down at
pronouncing
the
that
first-
correctly. I've been
All right,
mispronouncing it.
but you see, you come down then below Malier Road,
Yeah.
and now you've got Wood
Would be,
Road,
yeah.
which is a separated, a separate tract. The question is there, should the C1 parcel that's behind the actual frontage, but with frontage on Wood Road, be included within this overlay?
But if it is, then that's really one tract there that has different zoning, is that correct?
That's
That,
correct.
that one tract actually has 3
Three zones.
zonings. You've got AR2, what's that, R2, and then C1.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Wow.
But physically, it's not consistent as you go
Correct.
further south.
Correct, it varies, it varies. So for example, if you keep going down, Brad, just in that next section, all right, you'll see you've got those lots that are all C1 fronting on 1941, then you've got Wood Road back behind there, but those are also C1 tracks.
But ultimately, we're trying to make sure that 1941 looks good, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So would we, in that particular case, maybe leave Woodland off, anything that's actually facing Woodland off of that, where we still have a little flexibility for some others up in that area, but it's not really affecting our main.
I mean, drag,
Bruce,
yeah.
that's the judgment call y'all have to make. That's what I was saying. The hardest part of this is going to be drawing that map line. Because keep in mind, there's no delineation now on the basis of distance from the road right-of-way. It's gonna be tied to the parcels that are identified on the map.
Okay, Newton, if you come on further south, you hit that first big AR1 block of property that comes right up behind the little narrow strip of C1 there. Really, those bigger AR1 blocks were what we were wanting to protect, was it not?
To a large degree, you've got, notice that you've got C1 with, excuse me, AR1 behind it, right there. Now, this is between Sunnyside and Birdie Road. those are actually the largest undeveloped tracts that we have up there.
Right.
Now, the frontage is already zoned C1. The rear part is zoned AR1. So let's assume somebody wanted to do something with, well, let's look, Brad, let's look at the tract you've got highlighted. Well, either one of those
Yes,
will
sir.
work. All right. Now, let's assume, what's the acreage on the larger tract on the east?
On east side is 125 total.
Okay. So you are looking at a piece of property obviously being held for investment for future development. Okay? Now, it's split zoned, and that split zoning is a vestige from early zoning maps. That developer, or when somebody comes in and wants to develop it,
They'd have to have it rezoned.
they will have to have that rezoned if they develop the AR1 portion.
Okay.
And I think it is unlikely that somebody would come in and want to just develop the C1 strip, except maybe for Steve Morris. Okay, all right, now, all right. So you would have to have, but if he came in, and let's assume he wanted to do C1, and I'm kidding, I'm talking about Steve because he's the one who found that little tiny tract across from Chronic to develop. Okay? So somebody comes in and they want to develop just in C1, that doesn't have to be under the overlay, and assuming this entire tract's in the overlay, that portion of it will not require rezoning. But they would still have to come in with a master development plan, and that permit will be tied to that master development plan and conditioned. The permit will be conditioned on compliance with it. Now, let's assume they wanted to go on back to Old Atlanta Road and develop the AR1 portion. At that point, they've got to come in and rezone, and they will have to present a new master development plan that covers the entire tract.
Okay.
Brad, what is the depth of the C1 zoning there? 400 feet?
400 to property line, give or take, probably 500 to center line.
That's still a decent sized tract, decent
So
sized
30 acre swath, about 300, 400 feet. Let's see, let's get that in here.
However, a strip right there, I think, would be not the best development, because then you've got the property behind it. That tract should be probably some type of mixed use. If we could control it and tell them what to do, but we can't do that.
What's that one, Brad, about 500 probably from the center line?
I would, yes, sir, I would say probably 500 from center. on
I see
both
that's
sides.
one of those left over from when the 500 foot from the center line was done on both sides from Henry County line to the Pike County line.
Well, you remember, Frank, under the old zoning, they would just draw lines at certain distances from the
Yeah.
road,
Yeah.
irrespective of where the property line was.
So in general, if anybody came in, they would have to have their plan and rezone the other chunk of property to match it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Could you scroll down to where Birdie and Old Atlanta intersect?
Sure. Brad, go down to Birdie Road, next intersection. There you go. That's it.
There you go.
So you've got C1, I think, between the North Expressway and, God, that is not my voice,
That's old Old
and
Atlanta.
and Old Atlanta. All right,
South
so,
of Birdie. Yes, sir.
so how far up would NEID come?
It goes from the city limits to the county line.
Yes.
No, I mean, east and west.
Sorry.
Wherever y'all set it, but by the parcel boundary.
Okay, it looks like you've got green and then you've got a purple. Okay, you see the,
Yes, there are, those tracks, the ones that are fronting on Old Atlanta have two zonings. They have divided zoning. And then the purple is the storage units.
Yeah.
And that is zone C1B, I believe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
all right, then the rest of the green is what?
C1.
C1.
Big one, okay.
That is a little used car sales, right? I mean, just a postage stamp used car sales across the streets, Valero.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Now, that property on the northwest portion of that intersection was zoned before the recession and with the anticipation that somebody would develop a public shopping center there.
Yeah, they had a,
And then the property down below, the tract that, click on the ownership and then, yeah. That property was zoned by, I wanna say Mike Jackson, for what he anticipated having as a big box center.
But
And
that's
a-
where the
and-
pipeline is.
That I don't know, John, but the recession hit and so it never got done. Both of those projects died.
I think the pipeline crosses there somewhere.
There, right there. If you go, scroll up, take off the zoning, looks like probably down that a ways. It follows that northeast. Right there.
That's
You
what
can
I
see it
put,
cleared.
killed it.
Like our sewer didn't have it.
We're gonna discuss that.
So to be honest, what Brad said, you said you got Sharpies up there for him?
I was gonna say, I can go get you some if y'all need them, and we can
This
huddle
map
around the
here-
table.
This map here, if we put it on the table, I think it'd
Yes, sir.
be good.
So Eva's gonna run get us some. I have a question as we take this in. I think I can go find one out here. I think we've got one in the stairwell.
I guess Debbie had started, this is the map I have here where they've kind of identified the pertinent tracks down through there.
Right. So you've got the big version of this, right, John?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would not be nice to be consistent, but being consistent brings out problems too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Afraid so.
You kind of caught in
Yeah,
rocks the hard.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with, I mean, initially, there was no zoning in Spalding County until, yeah.
Right.
And then now we gotta deal with what's on the ground.
But it just seems like, when you look at the map, and you've got the large areas and then the narrow areas, well, somebody's playing favorites. We're just not consistent with it. I mean, you know,
Well, in what way? 'Cause
well, why would not this structure be included all the way back to here in the, plan?
well, yeah, I mean,
If you're gonna include these in the plan, well, why not this property too? I'm not saying
Yeah,
we should,
yeah.
I'm just saying that it's inconsistent
Right.
to do that.
yeah,
And I understand this has all been developed
yeah.
already, but that doesn't mean that somebody can't come in.
Yeah, to some extent, when you were probably here the first time we drew it, there was a lot of stuff down in here that we were, this area here where Atlanta Highway,
Right.
that we were going, hey, those are old homes, there's no point in including them.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
there were places where 750 feet actually extended beyond Old Atlanta Road.
I'm sorry?
There were places where 750 feet, which was the original demarc line, actually extended beyond Old Atlanta Road and also into residential zones that are behind the frontage along the lower part of 1941. So I would recommend that y'all collectively come down and mark the map, and then that can be put in a better formal form. But before we do that, we found a couple of typos that I've got to get corrected, but are y'all generally comfortable with the way the ordinance has been redone?
Fairly much.
I have a question. So if we're effectively eliminating C1B, for outside storage, i.e., auto sales, repair yards, something like that, with respect to the future land use map, where does Spalding County want that stuff to go? Because to my knowledge, Newton, it's not permissible in AKB either, correct?
No,
Right.
because we have, AKB is limited to planned residential, commercial, or industrial developments. So it would be able to be located in our older industrial parks. Which would be located at, for example, Kalamazoo and, what's the name of that road? Odell.
If the
Kalamazoo with the
tri-county
K.
overlay doesn't prohibit it.
And down, the undeveloped sections of MLK potentially, like for example, where you've got, diversified fabricators.
So some of that's city, some of that's county, okay.
But given what's developed on 1941, Brad, my gut feeling was we got plenty of outside storage that ain't going away.
I got
Do your own draw.
no desire to draw.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this.
We're looking for people that like it.
You're okay with just leaving the dark bound lines?
Leaving the what?
The dark bold line, I think.
I think that was kind of another run with Debbie kind of made to separate out by parcel as opposed to the, just the 500.
Well,
That was what it was drawn on there. I thought.
Like when you've got this is part of a neighborhood, if you look on your screens.
Yeah.
So this is part of a cul-de-sac neighborhood, all AR1. So that bold line that follows the cursor, that's actually where the outlier, the border from the overlay would be. Everything west of that line in that neighborhood would still remain part of that neighborhood. Everything east of that would be subject to overlay restrictions.
Yeah.
Same thing over here where Newton was talking about it, the green line actually going over Old Atlanta Road and the railroad tracks and everything.
Yeah.
That would still remain a neighborhood. This bold line here on the other side of the railroad tracks and rights of way would, everything west of that would be part of it. And then following all the way on up and down. Same, you got another neighborhood here that needs to be excluded. But the front portion of that neighborhood, even looking at it on Q Public, these are actually residential houses. But
That are
yet
in
they
C1.
still carry a C1 zoning. So is that gonna be hair shops, tax prep offices, tattoo parlors, et cetera? Or are those gonna remain houses and they need to be included in that R2 zoning?
Well, I feel confident that the leader of the free world can use a Sharpie to extend the path of a hurricane
Yeah, I
into
know,
Alabama.
I know.
We will be able to draw a line and mark the lines.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's kind of where I was saying, like where that little jog is there, just south of that, I'm kind of more in favor of carrying that on along that road as opposed to going west of the road there, I
talking
about-
suggest
those
just
are-
go along the road, for those other parcels that don't carry across. I mean, I understand the big AR1, because that's all part of that parcel, but those others that are just individuals, I'd just leave them off.
Those?
Yeah.
C1B, C2, C?
I can live with that.
Now, you're saying leave, you're not saying leave off the AR1, are you?
No, I'm just saying, I wouldn't include those in this, because they were actually fronted off of that other road.
Yeah, that's.
Let me
wood
check and see what's
out
actually there on Q Public. Get off of that.
And that way, we leave a little bit of leeway for some other development up there off of the main road, some kind of a frontage road that somebody could maybe go in and do something.
Well, yeah,
Got it.
and that kind of answers this question about where do you go to get your car repaired on Jordico Road? You
Right.
drive a block off Jordico Road and get it repaired.
Exactly.
Is that gentlemen, is that
That's not.
Out of
vis-
business?
That's not visible from, 1941, is it?
no, sir, it's behind here, but it's that C2, it locks up, it's that one, right there on your maps. But, there, it looks like it's an active site. I guess the tax assessor's thing doesn't necessarily look like that was an active business, but that was 2011, never mind.
Yeah.
So,
But-
so you're saying use that Wood Road as your boundary? Yes, sir.
I think, to me, that seems to make sense. But I guess going back to what you were saying, the other thing, and that was why I was asking earlier about if it is C1B, just allowing it to stay C1B, because, again, if you come in here and Griffin Spalding starts to boom and we need a couple of more car dealerships, do we really want to force them out to another area or make allowances to be able to have them up there, but have them done right?
Do you treat them as a special exception?
I think.
But we're saying right now you can't do it as a special exception.
Correct.
That's
So,
correct. That's what I've got in there, but Bruce, y'all tell me to change it.
To me, if you do it and you do it aesthetically pleasing, the way we've got laid out and stuff like that, and I guess I take like, if you go to, I'm trying to think, there's a couple areas down along the coast and some of those places, like even St. Simon's and stuff, where you're driving down through there and everything's set back, even your Publix and stuff, and
Yes, sir.
you really don't even know it's there, except a little bitty sign. But all that stuff is there, and if it's done right, it's not as bad, but it does make sense in most people, when you go into any, business district or whatever, you're gonna have most of your car dealerships kind of in a general area and others, because you don't really want that spread all over your county.
Riverside Drive, what it's changed into over in Macon for the last decade, 15 years.
Yeah.
So,
So, so that's the only concern that I have, that if we don't allow it at all, there's some reasons that may do it, or at least leave what's there, let those remain a C1B or an R3 or whatever, to allow a little bit of leeway for folks to come in and do some developments and some possibilities that could be done right. And that's just one of the things that when I was asking the questions originally, I was asking.
as the newer member of the team, are the C1Bs that are there, that I guess that are the troubled children, are they used car dealers or are they new car dealers? Or are they repair shops?
It varies a little, Brad. A lot of the auto dealers are non-conforming in C1.
So can we prohibit used car or used automobile sales, period? Can you prohibit one?
That's what I had in an earlier draft, but that doesn't make sense now with his use of zoning categories rather than business uses, yeah. But then, can't you have an escape clause? That under exceptional, appeals can be made to the chairman of the planning and zoning commissions,
That's what the special
For
exception would cover.
extraordinary developments that fall, that would be aesthetically pleasing, but fall outside the purview or fall outside the regulations of this particular ordinance?
No, that's the BZA.
Well,
That's-
Pike County has a provision, I'm certain Brad's familiar with this. Pike County has what I will call catch-all phrases that give discretion to the county to approve a use that is, quote, not
Right.
not listed but compatible.
Not specifically enumerated
Right.
is the quote.
Right.
Where most of our stuff has all other uses not listed
That's
or
correct.
prohibited.
We take,
So-
this ordinance since 94 has taken the position that use not listed is prohibited.
So if you had something, some language that said on a case-by-case basis, you know, do you open Pandora's box with that?
Well, John, I don't know what your criteria would be.
And that's,
Well, that's just as we've been talking, you know, is it a nice development? Is it well situated? Do they have a plan?
I have a case in Pike County now where I'm having to fit them in the catch-all, and I don't know how that's going to work. I haven't had to go through that before down there, and I don't know how it's gonna work.
we had, in our overlay, we had the special exception that certain things would be allowed via special exception only. So if you've got a used car or outside storage, boats, RVs, those type things, they had to be approved via special exception within the overlay on top of the master site plan, et cetera, going forward. So you could add that extra step. So with BZA, with commissioners, you would still have ultimate decision. So you got 4 ways to stop something or 4 ways to refine something before you have to make a final decision when it comes in. Once again, being a new guy, you know, that comes in, I don't want to turn this into Pike County North, but you have from a zoning and legal ordinance, we've got ways to safeguard if need be.
Let me just make a comment. It doesn't appear to me that the new car dealerships are the plague on the North Expressway. The plague up there is all this other stuff you've got. And maybe we ought to allow for new car dealerships. I know what the definitive clause on all this stuff has been outdoor storage. Certain businesses like that can't function without outside storage. I mean, that's the way they do. I'd rather, I'm not saying that they're sacrosanct, but I'm just saying that I'd rather see us address the crap that's out there. The stuff that when your children and my children drive in to Griffin from Atlanta and say, I thought you were gonna do something about this, you know, and we haven't. And maybe we're too caught up on the outside storage thing. I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but I'm just saying maybe that new car dealerships, I mean, if we had a Audi dealership that wanted to locate up way on the top end, and we had to tell them, I'm sorry, you can't do that, you got to put all your cars inside.
And that's where it's a new car only, not necessarily used car, or do you want to stipulate that it's sanctioned? So it's got to be Audi, Chevrolet, Ferrari, not Joe Blow's, you know, used auto sales.
Well, I'll tell y'all, if Ferrari comes down here and wants to open up a dealership, I'll revise the ordinance.
Hey, it's
But if I see you driving one, I'm going to ask questions.
Well, I don't know, like I say, I would feel a little more comfortable if we did have that, an extra step in there to allow, where we wouldn't just totally prohibit, but make them go through the steps, make them do it, you
Jump
know,
through the
but,
hoops.
yeah, to allow those exceptions. Because I just think, you know, thinking about the growth and for the future and whatnot, you know, I don't wanna create additional problems for ourselves. We've done some of that in the past.
Yeah.
You know, and I think if things are done right, and like you say, you know, the area right across from Chronic, down in the hole, that's what is the eyesore much more than Chronic. And you know, and again, that's where they bring in a lot of tax base to this county,
I do.
and those businesses and stuff, and I certainly don't want to go in there and, deter any good business to come in and, you know, and wanna come in here and do business in the county.
Yeah.
Well, let's let's take a little tour of outside storage of 1941. Okay. The city limits end roughly at the Ford dealership. So as you go up, and as you're heading toward Manley and Birdie Roads, you remember we had the outfit that had the storage buildings. That would be outside storage. Chronic is also outside storage for all of its dealerships. Napide is outside storage. The irony is,
You've got your new RV park, or new RV sales across from Chronic, or near
yeah,
Chronic.
Walter is correct, and that needs to be identified, and that was somewhat of a problem as Deborah was leaving. Then you go up, and we've got the RVs at School Road. All right? So outside storage can take many forms.
Yeah, and you've got, you know, in addition to Birdie Road, what is it?
You gotta use. car lot.
Enterprise parks their cars all over Creation, and they're up by the used store in that postage
Correct.
stamp lot.
That's correct.
But again, if we have a 50-foot buffer,
That one.
and most of that stuff is not visible anyway, you know, it may warrant allowing somebody to show how they plan to do something and make it aesthetically pleasing if they provide something there, if it makes sense. So,
Do you also want to limit the number of, say it's vehicles, do you want to say X number of vehicles? There are several, if you go where,
No, I don't want to get hung up on new car sales. I want, like, if I want to consider something, it's something that would give us some latitude if something extraordinary comes along in terms of extraordinary business opportunity and extraordinary aesthetics. That somewhere down the line, someone could say, okay, we're gonna take this to the planning commission, to the county commission. We think this project has real potential and merit. And part of it is I can't foresee today what that might be.
the overlay ordinance would allow it to come from planning commission to board of commissioners until final approval. If you want to do the case by case, that special exception would give that extra set of meetings with the Board of Appeals and the Board of Commissioners for the extraordinary circumstances to come in. So by creating the ordinance, you're automatically going to see anything that moves delineated within this ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, they would
before
have to,
comes
it
in.
would have to be
So-
it'd have to follow the steps. It'd
Yes,
have to
sir.
be a master plan.
All right, let me suggest this. Look on page 5. These are where we talk about the uses. I will move D and E to be E and F, and D will be, I'll do text to add, excuse me, an extraordinary, what we're calling an extraordinary development, or business opportunity.
Yeah, and I like the words extraordinary because I want them to think it's not everything that comes along. It's one in 1,000.
Well, Walter, I don't know that a car dealership's gonna qualify as 1 in 1,000, but it could be something that would be
A car
aesthetically-
dealership that was aesthetically pleasing might
I was
qualify.
gonna say, if it's aesthetically pleasing, then you would have the authority to permit it. And then ultimately, that would be a condition, that would ultimately have to be approved by Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, I go for that.
Yeah. I like that. I just don't want to, like I say, totally preclude someone from wanting to come in here and do business if there's some good opportunities or good potential. And, I mean, I think there is, and I think that a lot of our problem, as we talked about before, is more along the lines because things have gotten out of hand and not been monitored and people held accountable, as opposed to, you know, what the real function of the businesses are. So hopefully we can move along those lines.
So am I reading that correctly? Is this more of a code enforcement or lack
I think a
thereof
lot of
over
our
the years.
problems, a lot of things that we talk about, and we kind of begin to think, oh, that's just a problem.
Yes, sir.
You know, that's what the issue is, but a lot of it could have been handled through code enforcement, and we may not be at this position today.
And just-
Bruce
just-
is correct, Brad. Part of it's been code enforcement. For example, we were, urging Deborah to take action on the property across from Chronic as being a junkyard and being in violation of the zoning ordinance. Now, the Andrews junkyard, I believe it's Andrews, and it's down at Vineyard Road. That's been there since before I was born.
Yes, but Chad told me when that sucker burned down and they replaced it, they were not grandfathered into having all that clutter. He told me they were gonna have to clean up that clutter, and it's been cluttered from day two.
Yeah.
You talking about that one?
You're talking about,
Oh, yeah, we love that.
no,
No.
that's
That's the
my,
best
that's
it's
Steve
ever was.
Morris's, that's across from Chronic.
This is
They-
Adams or
They got
Ad-
that picture on a good day up there.
Okay,
All right,
Yeah, that looks more like it.
so that's the aerials.
Yeah, I mean, look at that.
That's,
it's
yeah.
a tiny, tiny little
ridiculous.
strip that happened to have frontage on
Yeah.
1941.
Right there.
Well, and there's a bigger version of that going north when you pass Malia Road on the left. I went by there at 5 o'clock in
Yeah,
the
we're
morning
just, yeah, we're just
Monday,
talking about that as one of the
and the
clutters.
parking lot was full of cars. There's no lights on at the business, right there.
That, yes, sir.
That whole parking lot.
And that looks like it's spilling off into there as well.
Yeah. I'm afraid it is.
That's that old, that was a restaurant and like a tattoo shop or
That,
something.
the area, the property behind there was built, and approved for being
Zoom
like
in on
a
the little
dirt
shed
bike,
up that's
a
on the,
dirt bike trail.
go
Yeah,
north a little
right.
bit, one more block.
That was.
No, down, right, up
Go
with your
down.
cursor, up with your cursor. Yeah, zoom in, look at all that.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that.
Nice.
What is that?
And Newton, why don't you share with the group what the county commission voted to do with code enforcement at their last meeting?
That's been postponed. They delayed it Monday, so they're actually meeting this Monday, the 10th, to have the first reading for the Marshals program to implement
No,
that.
I'm not talking about the Marshals program. Marshals gonna be different than code enforcement.
It's
Marshals,
gonna be
Marshals,
exactly the same
Marshals
thing.
gonna collect their money for them.
It's also gonna be code enforcement.
Well,
They weren't pleased with Charles Abbott.
I know, and somehow they seem but I don't, it remains, they express a genuine concern, which I believe, but I don't know that Marshals is the answer.
What
More
is
than
the
one
answer
code
then?
enforcement officer is also gonna be the answer if we stay where it is. We got one guy to canvass the entire county,
I know,
so.
but the consultants were too expensive.
All right, let me get y'all to do this as far, in terms of the text. Get y'all to make a motion to recommend approval with the correction of the typos and the addition of section D in 22, sorry, that's 2204, isn't it, Brown? No, yeah, 2204.
2205, D.
D, subpart D for extraordinary business opportunities. And
Wait.
what I'll do is, for me,
I want to throw this out in there though, because I think that needs, y'all are gonna have to address that at some point.
we will have to address signage. That's a topic for another day, Frank.
Okay, that's good.
Trust me on that.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay. We'll,
and then I'll get you the text drafted and y'all can review it just so you know what's in the ordinance going up to the Board of Commissioners at the end of the month. Do they meet before BOC zoning here?
They will meet on the 25th. BOC zoning will be the 27th.
Okay.
So we'll see y'all twice that week.
I'll bring it back by the 25th and y'all can see it again and put it on the agenda again.
Yes, sir.
But, okay.
I so move.
I'll second that.
all right, those in favor signify by
Frank?
I move, Frank seconded. And if you want me to go down and make a red mark on the map, I will, but I mean, I don't have great quibbles with that. I kind of agree with what Bruce said about
Well, y'all come and draw on the map.
Where you need me to be, Bruce?
And if there are no changes, there are no changes, and that's fine, but y'all come and draw on the map to identify changes you need.
Let's see, that's right there. Right side, so it's, where at?
Hey, Frank.
Down
Frank.
farther south. So, right there,
Uh-huh.
and that's AR ones or farther south.
Do you want
Right there, okay,
We
yes,
got
sir.
all those little, see, some of that is,
And we made one
doesn't
lot.
add up what we're doing there,
Yeah.
or more, I mean, because they're not even, again, unless the intention is to try to force somebody to buy all of those up.
And develop it, yes, sir. And I think that's what the incentive clause was when you had the hardship tracks.
Right,
So, what is that?
but does it really make sense to consider all of those all the way over here?
Who's where, down in here,
See,
so, right in here, yeah, so those are still
you
zoned
got all
C1.
these, right, all these tiny little
But those are all
Well,
residential.
they're residential coming off of Vineyard Road, what is it, a church?
Oh, yeah,
There's just
yeah.
other things. So does that really make sense to include,
Do you wanna have a
How
residential?
far back are we going?
right now, it's
Right now,
going
it
all the way
just goes
back
right
to,
there, so,
Oh, okay.
right there.
that's good, well,
So, let me see if I can do this.
Shoot. Shoot.
but then you have, is all that one track?
Yes, sir, right there.
Oh, wow.
See, that's the thing, you got
Yeah.
if any part of it, if any part of it touches, and I presume the same for this too, that's,
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
sir, that's one right.
That's
here.
what I was trying to look at.
So, and it's actually got that one, so it predates whatever that little, was that I guess that might be a leftover from our public works.
Specific location where the Ferrari.
I've got that one laid out.
I wanna put it next to Dollar General.
Oh, great, great,
Okay.
great.
Your car dealership. so-
The new one or the old one?
All cars. Just below the Dollar General. You know the guy that was doing all the car restoration things, and then he sold it. It's Sunnyside. The guy was doing restoration there to get his license lapsed, and he came in and played the violin for us, and we gave it back to him. Then he turned around and sold the business. So anyway, it's for sale. But I came by that place that I had them bring up on the GIS thing. I came by there Friday morning at 5. The parking lot was 3/4 full.
See one on this side that they're long lots, and they're A on the side that faces the mountain.
Is that right? These are, all these are one.
I'll have to double check
They
that.
do, all of them.
Let me scroll down and see. 'Cause
I think, but see, yeah. But I don't understand if this looks like a separate
That's
parcel.
something right there, so that's what, I think these were C1 just because of the line before.
Well, that's what I'm wondering,
So
that
it's like double-
that 500 foot.
That could be an arbitrary.
This is 500 foot.
Bruce, what road are you on there?
We're, it's right up above there, Brad. Keep going on. There you go.
Yeah, so, there it is for comparison.
So those lots that go all the way.
Yeah.
Well, no, you've got one lot with frontage.
You got this. You
Yeah,
got
you
this
got this with
parcel.
frontage, and then those actually
These are-
access off of, what is that, old that
Where
line?
the road.
So,
So I think you can bring the line down here, Bruce. Just that little strip. Whoever we were talking.
So if I own a piece of property, and can half of it be under the NETA program and the other half be outside?
Well, we're trying to,
Avoid that. And I understand that.
we've got it.
But that makes,
I
That just makes it look to be inconsistent. But it's a catch-22, because if you make it consistent, then you're going to be splitting property and.
You've got a natural T section here, so once again, you're gonna have those convenient barber shops, or beauty shops, nail place, you know, type thing.
Right. And from a tax standpoint, it's really costing the county money. It's kind of like the apartment. I mean, the apartment, they never pay their fair share towards the school program. They just don't do that. It falls on the single-family homeowners. When you say that again?
I'll put it up on the big screen, follow us down there.
No fault of requiring a development plan, which God forbid, have somebody in Spalding County develop property.
Yes, sir, vineyard. So you see.
Or an impact statement. How's it gonna impact?
No fault. Of course, we didn't have the notice and hearing.
Right, right.
When I was in the private world, I was with Western Mutual and then State Farm. And that's also inside the city limits of Sunnyside, but if Sunnyside stays incorporated, then their zoning stays. If Sunnyside doesn't,
So that was taking out all those vacant lots.
this one.
Is that it? No, the one across the road from,
That,
no, actually, it's right there, right there.
Yeah,
So
this is all
of those
C1.
are C1.
yes,
Yeah, so
but their current use is residential.
Except for,
If you wanna call them that.
Oh, here, let's do this, so that, you're right.
this one on this side.
But they're all C1 though now, so everything's in there right there showing C1.
Yeah, he went back to retreat.
Because that is, it's actually C1.
Like I said, I think it makes sense as you have
What do
these,
you want, me on?
intersections.
And it's not 750, but since you have. And then it's bad.
But it's
But
all
that-
the
but
same.
it's one tract of
All the
land.
same tract.
Yes,
I
sir.
understand that, well, no, this is not.
No, yeah, it is.
Let me-
This was the same parcel?
All that, that's 180%.
They call it split zone, but it's all live under the same.
But so it's already listed as split zone, so why include it then? If it's gonna be agriculture residential use? I know it's, that's the 750.
Well, that's what we were saying, these would be big parcels, that's, they could do some, those are the largest parcels along the whole.
That's 130 acres, you've got roughly 80 acres that's AR1, you've got, almost 37, and change that's C1 there, and that's rough draw lines. But it's one parcel, 125 acres.
And
Right there.
C1.
Yes,
Well, you're too.
that's what we're talking about.
A C1.
I wish they'd have just followed the parcel lines, but that parcel has two different zones that comes in, and it's all.
You gotta have 20 foot, I know, 20 foot, not put out 50 foot.
Now that I don't know that you own that property, in fact, I want to be sure that we give it special attention anytime that comes I got nothing to hide.
But that's right, it is like, it's like a Dollar General or something.
I've got to have
I mean,
nothing to
if
hide.
all C1, you can put a Dollar General, and then you just have to go along with the 20 foot.
Now, what y'all are gonna do, there's a Dollar General that's gonna go on 41 on the Pike County side. 41's the overlay there, so it's gonna have some aesthetic stuff. And look at K&K. So this down there, they're in our industrial park, or they were in Pike's industrial park, but since they had road frontage, they had to put a pretty facade on the front of their building, the fence with the screen, to screen their secondary building as it came in. Nobody else in the, industrial park had to do that. So, but K&K did, and it's kind of a good gateway. And the second they came in and put that pretty facade on there, all other four lots, we had offers on them almost immediately. So if you build it, they will come kind of thing.
Well, that's why that item is on the agenda for the meeting in January, is because there's a lot of things to be handled here, code enforcement.
Yes, sir. Now, here's the shortfall of code enforcement. They don't necessarily have right of entry, so regardless of, complaint, they can't automatically go on the property. And that's where the marshal. But, once again, gentlemen, we have one code enforcement officer for the entire county, so he can start really at one corner, start writing tickets. It's gonna be, and it's also see, here's the other thing, right away is us, it's fire marshal, it's also,
Union City, Union City.
Yes, sir. So there's four people that can put it right on the tip for that.
That's out there at School Road. That's out there.
Which is, there's some, that's the big intersection. Is that what you sent me?
Over there on the right of way in the ditch.
Is that what did you send me the RV guy or the car guy at Sunnyside that was right here?
No, that was, Adam's office,
Okay, all right.
So, yeah, I mean, they were this far from the traffic.
Okay, yes, sir, yes, sir. And see, once again, at that point, there's four different entities that can give them a ticket. And GDOT can go in and, so.
That's what I've always thought. I thought they're violating GDOT.
Oh, yeah. And then across the road.
What's that surplus army store that's over in the Mark County, where you're coming from? Yeah, that guy always parks on the shoulder. I've always wondered where you could do that on a state mandated highway. Yeah, the army surplus guy, that's got the big fingers and stuff.
Oh, okay.
It's like, he says on the Mark County.
Does he move it?
No, sir. Well, I guess his daily driver, he does, but.
As long as he moves it on a daily basis, I would think it would be difficult. Give him a hard time.
Gotcha.
You see, this guy is, he's got to point it down at the ditch.
Yes, sir. But if he's in the ditch, he's in the right of way.
Well, he's absolutely. And then they even have a section in the paper about the one on the west side of the road. That used, that the tornado came through several years ago before the building died.
That gas station.
And
Sheriff's
he's moved on his truck from the family.
Yes, sir. Let me click on the big
But
letter.
this is the one that, he says, whatever they did here, they have to come in to get this rezoned to get it. Right, but that's what this is a different property than the rest of the south of the same property.
There's a 750 yard, and then you've got the road, the little train road there.
Okay, I need to go, so, you're looking,
I want to say, this is a different.
I've got it selected there. Let me take the zoning off on that so you can see it and zoom in.
We're interested, just the same.
So-
It's the same
Property
owner.
owner.
So, that one, and so you see how it comes across right here at the road?
They're owned by the same person.
So that's one tract. That's one tract.
That's one track right there. So,
And then you wanna know this one, Bruce, where my cursor is?
All right, so that one, this is that one.
This one's right there. And it includes that little piece right there.
Okay, now,
This one. Or are you talking about this one?
no, he's talking about the one, across by Venture right there.
That one?
It's owned by the same person.
So that
no,
one?
the next one there,
The next one there.
That
right there.
Yeah.
That's, that's another Allen, that's Allen Motley's.
I think they should vote too, Lord. But that's why I came, just to understand.
Allen Motley's favorite, my favorite, this is here, it's gonna be down there, you can- Well, Allen's where it's at. Allen's all in. But is this, I know his, all this is his, but is it come on down, the road? Well, the thing is, if you look on this map, these are the only large undeveloped tracts.
It comes down to there, Bruce, so it's gonna be,
Where,
so,
the verdict?
just before Birdie, so, let's see. That is the one y'all were in question on, and then this one right here. Allen Motley.
Yeah, but the one to the right of that one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That one right where you first saw, that's not Allen.
He's a real estate guy, developer guy. Faircloth. So, well, I'm looking at it right here, that's Alan Mobley. Okay, I don't know who that is. So, now, Faircroft owns one, but Alan Mobley owns everything around him.
Go to that right.
Sorry, Bruce, two conversations.
Right there where your cursor, go south, right there.
That's Alan,
Okay, I thought.
but that's not wide enough to put in an entrance.
And including
They
this,
will give him a break and just.
but if you include that, that includes,
That would get your big residential that you do for it.
okay.
They'll probably stay. Sunnyside will stay, I'm sure.
But you think it's gonna resolve it? Really?
Right now, they need people to actually build seats on the power field.
Well,
And if you build seats in there, like I mentioned, three council members or their, city constitution or, ordinances or whatever, they've all got to speak.
Is this a separate track here?
Yeah.
I would include it. Because it's coherently part of the, you can make the arguments that coherently part of it.
So I'm gonna get Brian to read all that.
I was gonna say, can you even read what we've done?
Well, the good news is this, you can come back to y'all to formally adopt on the 25th, then it goes to them on the 27th.
Well, yeah, I thought we had one more body.
Oh, so I do. What days of publication? I thought that was this meeting, then the 27th. Well, that's 27, I did advertise it for the 27th, or 5, so that makes a difference. We'll see if she gets it.
That's where the post office, the little post office is right there, correct?
The what?
Little post office is right there, Sunnyside.
Yes,
Got the SeaWorld.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the Ordinance place out there. All right, y'all need to make a motion to approve this map as the NEID map. And the green line map? The green, the NEID is bound by the green line, the boundaries of subdivision line. Brad will have GIS.
Also moved.
Teresa, did you get that?
Who made the motion and second?
Nick made a motion. Alan did. I need a second. I'll second. All in favor?
Bruce second.
All right, right, you voted. Four, one.
Hey, boys, knowledge is power.
Four, oh, and one.
He was not
Mr.
against
Frank got stayed.
Frank abstained.
We just like it now.
Get all the property.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
This cold weather's killing my joints.
Beat that horse pretty bad, didn't you? Beat that horse bad.
We got it.
We've given them worse.
All right. What we will do on this is I will send you out the revisions, and then I will have Brad send out the revised map that you have already voted. So this will not have to be an agenda item on the 25th, but it will be available in final form by then.
Okay, we don't have to do a second reading or any of that
No.
BS?
No. Y'all aren't involved with readings. What
Good.
y'all do is not a first reading. It goes to BOC.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
All right, we had,
I second.
we have Brad's got one thing.
Oh, gentlemen, I don't need the decision tonight. I would like this to, be voted sometime on the 25th. But the start time of our meetings, Board of Appeals has moved to start meeting at 6 p.m. to be in conjunction with the BOC. Myself and Eva both will probably be the ones, at least for the time being, that'll be coming back. We're both outside the county, so there's not really enough time for us to go home, grab dinner, come back. So we're using y'all's tax dollars to pay us for 2 hours to sit here till 7. Can we move this meeting to start at 6 p.m. starting in February?
Yes.
I don't have a problem. Anybody have a problem with it?
Bruce is the only one who minds.
No, I'm good with that.
All right, we can do that.
Okay.
6 p.m.
Be sure you send out a notice.
January.
Yes, sir. We will make sure, we'll probably still call you, all that type stuff. But thank you,
Okay,
gentlemen.
there's no other business at this point. There was a note there to approve the minutes. We have no minutes to approve.
Right.
So, I'll call for adjournment.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Unanimous.